From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has addressed the crowds marching in Caracas in support of the country's sovereignty. President Maduro denounced what he called the opposition's provocations on the border, and he also broke off diplomatic ties with the government of Colombia.
I cannot continue. I cannot continue withstanding this. We cannot continue withstanding the territory of Colombia is given for an attack against Colombia. That's why I've decided to break all political and diplomatic relationships with the fascist government of Colombia and all their ambassadors and all the consuls who must leave in 24 hours time of Venezuela. Out of here, oligarchy. Out of here. Get out of here. Enough is enough.
Maduro also reminded his supporters that it's the people who rule Venezuela and not international forces. He said he is committed to the constitution of his country.
For you, I hold these reins, and I will continue to hold them in my hands. Based on this constitution, governing in a democratic, free and constitutional way our country for the welfare of the majority in our country, for the working people. That's my supreme commitment. And why am I here? Because you are the ones who decide in Venezuela. In Venezuela, it's not Donald Trump and the gringo imperialists who decide. In Venezuela, it's not Ivan Duque or the Colombian oligarchy that decides. In Venezuela, it's the sovereign people who decide.
Maduro also asked the opposition how long they will keep up these sanctions that are hurting the people of Venezuela.
And I ask the opposition minority who have taken the path of a coup d'etat and are calling for imperialist intervention. I ask them, until when will you damage our country? How long will you invent these games to destabilize and damage our country? I ask you, what have you achieved in 20 years of conspiracies? What have you achieved in these last 30 days of the phantom president? What have you achieved? I ask, after 30 days, why didn't you call presidential elections if you supposedly had power? Those elections of yours should be today, if you had any power.
Maduro was speaking to a demonstration in support of the Bolivarian Revolution, which started this morning. They demanded respect for Venezuela's sovereignty and condemned the attempts to intervene in the country. They said they will defend the gains of the last 2 decades.
I'm a member of the People's Militia and a teacher at the Bolivarian University, and what we want is to defend our revolution and the changes that this country has seen, which have been absolutely fundamental for the last 20 years.
Earlier, the Venezuelan opposition and its international allies began their promised operation to force so-called humanitarian aid across the border from Colombia, near the town of Ureña, on the Colombian side of the Simón Bolívar international border. A truck with U.S. aid boxes has been set ablaze, a part of a false flag operation. Our correspondent Madeline Garcia is there now.
We are witnessing a false flag scenario. People who were on the Colombian side were promoted by José Manuel Olivares, who is a lawmaker who is on the run. In the early morning hours, he was there on the bridge organizing terroristic actions and vandalism, along with Dilcar Fernandez. They attempted to cross a bus into Venezuelan territory, but then they burned this bus right in the center of the bridge, but still on the Colombian side, in order to blame the Bolivarian National Guard of Venezuela. It's a new false flag which is being denounced from here in Venezuela. During the morning hours, we saw that the first action, which had 3 military servicemen in armored vehicles, threw people who were there attempting to cross into Venezuela, as usual, who didn't know of the border closure. And they are now trying to hold the Venezuelan National Guard responsible for the burning of this bus in Colombian territory. That's what's developing here in San Antonio de Táchira, as acts of violence continue in Ureña and at the Simón Bolívar International Bridge on the other side. We are located in the center of Ureña and the Simón Bolívar Bridge.
The Venezuelan opposition was also planning to force aid across the border from Brazil, but just 2 small truckloads of aid remain on the Brazilian side of the border as of 4 p.m. local time. Things have been relatively calm, though not normal, in the Brazilian border town of Paracayamá and the Venezuelan town of Santa Elena de Uairén. The day in Paracayamá began with a press conference held by the Foreign Minister of Brazil and representatives of the United States and the opposition. They said they will attempt to enter into Venezuela with 200 tons of food and medicine. Our correspondent André Vieira is there and sent this report.
We are here on the Brazilian border with Venezuela, on the Brazilian side, and where you can see those 2 vehicles, that is Venezuela. So far, it is just those 2 pickups that have arrived here, as the Brazilian Foreign Ministry announced earlier in a news conference with representatives of the United States and of the Venezuelan opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó. So far, no aid lorry has crossed the border into Venezuela. The situation here is calm. The Brazilian army is on one side, the Venezuelan army is on the other side, and everything is peaceful. We will be here keeping you up to date.
We thank André for that report. Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza pointed out that UN agencies and International Red Cross are not participated in the border show. He tweeted that there's a simple reason for this, saying, quote, "It is obviously an action with political objectives and could never be described as a humanitarian action," he wrote. Demonstrations against intervention in Venezuela have been taking place around the world. In London, protesters condemned the interference pushed by the U.S. government, describing the action as despicable. The demonstration took place outside the Bank of England, which is refusing to hand over more than $1 billion worth of Venezuela's gold reserves. The former mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, was at the protest.
Because all my life, America's governments have tried to overthrow regimes they don't like. And whilst American governments say, oh, we're defending democracy, no. Almost all those governments have been democratically elected or have come to power overthrowing an evil right-wing dictatorship. America's interventions are just so they can continue to extract the wealth of that nation. Demonstrations like this are about the only way to get the truth across to people. All I read in the papers about Venezuela, they depict it as a disaster. You never see them talking about the elimination of poverty, creating the ability for every kid to go to school and learn to read, getting rid of all the inequalities that were there. Chavez transformed his nation.
The president of Cuba has tweeted his support for the Venezuelan people and the government of Nicolas Maduro. With the hashtag #HandsOffVenezuela, Miguel Díaz-Canel says, enough of false pretexts to conceal sinister plans. It is the people plunged into poverty by imperialist aggression who need humanitarian aid. And support for the government of Venezuela is also being shown in Chile. Demonstrators gathered outside the Venezuelan embassy in Santiago. They held a big banner that read, "Peace in Venezuela." In France, there was a show of solidarity during Saturday's Yellow Vest demonstrations. They denounced U.S. intervention in Venezuela and showed support for the Venezuelan people's fight for sovereignty. And in Sydney, Australia, protesters braved bad weather to support the growing Hands Off Venezuela movement. Under umbrellas, they held signs calling on the international community to stop Donald Trump's push for war in Venezuela. Others called for an end to the economic blockade against Venezuela. More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. More than 200,000 electoral delegates in Cuba will take part in the constitutional referendum to be voted on Sunday. Our correspondent Luis Autier reports on the island's cartoonists who have been hard at work making people laugh and think about the issues at stake.
This is what Havana looks like with only a few hours to go before the popular referendum where Cubans will ratify or reject a new constitution. For some time now, the referendum has been everywhere, dominating public spaces, the pages of newspapers and magazines, and the TV and radio headlines. The media interests include cartoons like this. The artists know that visual humor is one of the best weapons to defending an idea. That's why Adan Iglesias has dedicated 15 cartoons to this topic. He says he has many reasons, but one in particular.
I am banking on a yes vote for one major reason, which perhaps you share with me. I am a father. I have children. I am deeply interested in a bright and prosperous future for me and my children. And I know that all the analysis that has been done by the population can give us a better country from all points of view. Even from the point of view of humor, we can have more publications, more outlets. I have faith in all this.
For the all-hander lass, a good cartoon is the one that not only makes people laugh, but also makes them think. Therefore, he wanted to show the little-known moments that Cuba experiences, as more than 8 million citizens took part in an unprecedented popular debate to build, together, the law of laws.
Here in Cuba we have a saying that goes anything they did. Even the cat did. Even the cat ate here. Even the cat danced here. Then even the cat is included. And that really happened. People went with their pets to the meetings. So even the cats took part in the process.
Enrique Lacoste is one of the sharpest creative minds of graphic humor in Cuba. With simple lines, he can depict what is proposed by the new constitution in matter of gender, for example. Dazzling everybody, he can even draw a contemporary José Martí who votes for what he always dreamed, a basic love of the republic that expresses the full dignity of human beings. His skillful pen also shows how confrontation between Cuba and the United States has been a constant of history.
This constitution, adapted to the new times, is a constitution that makes our society more democratic, more fair, with more solidarity. It is a blow against the empire. This one shows the way they try to distort the reality of a revolution. So you have the soldier who is voting and he says to imperialism, this is a socialist democracy campaign. So we will go ahead with more socialism, more social justice, more democracy.
Suggestive and original, these vignettes are drawings of the Cubans' reality now. But soon they take their place in history as the reflection of a time when the Cubans defended, at the ballot box, the kind of country they wanted. Luis Autier Canton, Telesur, Havana.
And just a day before the vote, Luis Autier has the latest on the preparations.
Yes, indeed, good morning. There are less than 24 hours for the constitutional referendum that will be happening tomorrow here in Cuba and in some polling colleges overseas. The National Electoral Commission said that everything is ready as they delivered the 10,000 ballots that will be used tomorrow during the referendum. In the ballot, the voter can read a question that is the main question of all this, the whole process. Do you ratify the new constitution? And then there's a checkbox with the yes and a checkbox with the no, in where the voter can make a check mark. Also, it's important to recall that February the 24th is a really important date for the Cubans, as in the 1895, José Martí and other patriots launched the re-beginning of the National Liberation War in the 19th century. Also, this night will continue the concerts that offered by Cuban music and Cuban artists in celebration for this process, and also as a solidarity with the Venezuelan people. They are living a really tough moment right now. This is pretty much what we have right now. We'll be back soon with more. Now I'm back to you.
We thank Luis for that report. thousands of people have marched to denounce the murder of environmental activist Samir Flores, who was gunned down on Wednesday. The demonstrators held banners that read, "Samir didn't die, the government killed him," to call for justice for the activist. They also demanded that the 2 thermoelectric plants and a pipeline project that Samir opposed to be cancelled. The activists denounced the projects, saying they will contaminate drinking water in the state of Morelos. Thousands of Brazilian workers gathered outside Sao Paulo's City Hall following 2 weeks of a strike. Their demonstrators resolved to continue the strike and join a nationwide strike against the pension reform proposed by President Jair Bolsonaro.
On February 22nd in São Paulo, tens of thousands of striking municipal government workers gathered in front of City Hall for a public assembly to vote on whether their 2-week-long strike, which has closed 70% of the city's public schools, would continue.
We are striking here in front of Sao Paulo City Hall, and I'm sure that we are going to vote to maintain the strike today, because we met with Mayor Bruno Covas today, and he didn't give us any answers at all. He's eliminating the right to strike and won't reverse the workers' salary cuts.
Mayor Bruno Covas raised pension deductions for city workers from 11% to 14% and turned their pension fund management over to a private company. When the workers announced their strike on February 4th, he threatened to sue the unions. During the assembly, the workers voted to continue the strike, and they also voted to join a nationwide strike against President Jair Bolsonaro's neoliberal pension reforms.
I am here defending women because they want to raise our retirement age to 65, and we don't accept this. In the old days, slaves were freed when they turned 60, but with the new reforms, we'll have to work until we die. I don't accept this, and I don't accept that they are lowering my salary. We are going to continue fighting.
After the assembly was over, the workers marched for 5 kilometers through downtown in the rain, shutting down rush hour traffic, and they promised to do it again next week if their demands are not met. Brian Mir, Telesur, São Paulo.
19 Spanish-speaking teen girls who were held as sex slaves in Trinidad are now in better health after being rescued by police. The National Security Minister provided an update on the investigation.
Young ladies are getting better in health. Some of them had some health issues, so we had to move very quickly. We were providing the social services side, including, from the psychology point of view. It has been a difficult operation because of that, exactly as you say, the language barrier. So we've also had to get persons in to assist the social workers and the police investigators. So I can tell you there's an active police investigation taking place. There's a completion of statements from the girls taking place and the gathering of evidence taking place. I don't want to say more than that because it's an active investigation and I expect the leads to be pursued. But the girls are being well looked after, and I'm very thankful to the Ministry of Social Development for that.
Time for a second break. We'll be back in a minute.
And learn about this crucial vote for Cuba's democracy. Watch Cuba Votes, only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Welcome back. Thousands of internally displaced people in Nigeria defied the early Saturday morning explosion scare in Maiduguri and came out to cast their votes in the presidential election. There's a large turnout at polling stations where refugees displaced by Boko Haram are casting their votes. A series of explosions were heard in the city of Maiduguri just hours before polls opened. The military have, however, assured the residents of their safety and asked them to ignore the explosions. Meanwhile, the country's Electoral Commission has announced that it will extend voting hours in areas where polling stations open late. voting was delayed in several parts of the country, including the capital Abuja. The Electoral Commission chairperson said the delays were due to a number of challenges, including the late arrival of electoral officials.
I'm not happy with the delay. As they say, we're supposed to board early because around 2, they will close everything. So after that, they don't start anything, so I'm not happy.
Polling booths, they say about 20,000 registered voters. And if about 20,000 registered voters, and by this time they have not started, if you can check the number, even by the crowd outside, if there's at least up to 50 or 60% turnout, it will be difficult to finish in a day. I don't foresee them I don't see everybody that is here voting within the stipulated time.
More than 120,000 polling stations opened early in the morning all across Nigeria, from the city of Lagos in the south to Kano in the north and the country's rural heartlands. Results are expected to be announced from early next week, with the winner gaining control of Africa's biggest economy and most populous nation. The Nigerian Electoral Commission has postponed elections in the Boni local government area in the country's southwest after voting failed to take off due to violence. The Commission say elections will be held on date to be announced later. Security forces used tear gas to disperse supporters of the ruling APC who blocked voting materials and officials from leaving the Electoral Commission's office. The supporters claimed the materials deployed to the region were fake. South African governing party, the African National Congress, has confirmed that its acting spokesperson, Sisi Kodwa, has been accused of rape. The party said the complaint sent a grievance letter to its Deputy Secretary General. It added that the Deputy Secretary General advised the complaint to report the matter to law enforcement agencies because it was a criminal matter.
The advice we've given the complainant is that she needs to go to the criminal justice system with her complaint, in the sense that it's a bit different from when there is a difficulty between staff and membership. I think this is something that, to our understanding, happened in a private party setting. Of course, that's the allegation. Therefore, the ANC really cannot do anything about it.
Senegal's President Macky Sall has declared that he's confident of victory in Sunday's presidential elections. Speaking to thousands of supporters that turned out for his final rally at a stadium in capital Dakar, he promised to introduce universal healthcare and improve access to education. Sall, who has been in office since 2012, is seeking a 5-year mandate extension in one of Africa's most stable democracies.
I will maintain the gains made with the emergent Senegal plan through universal health care. Women, I thank you. I will extend free C-section. From the unwell, we will continue to offer free dialysis. Careful children will be free. We will help families.
More than 90 people have died in northeast India after drinking liquor tainted with methyl alcohol, and a chemical which attacks the central nervous system. Other 200 were taken to hospitals across the state of Assam after consuming the alcohol. The incident came less than 2 weeks after more than 100 people died in the north of the country after consuming tainted alcohol. The owner of a local brewery unit and 8 others have been arrested.
They brought bootleg liquor. I said not to drink, but they drank, and after drinking they didn't have their dinner and slept. In the morning they said they had headache. We took to the hospital and took them to Jorhat Hospital. Then we heard that they died in the hospital.
And with this story we come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.